Time shows who you are, I said to the empty kitchen, right after Esme told me. Bring a proper gift or don't come. Her voice still rang in the handset, like a coin hitting the bottom of a jar, bright, cold, and small. I set the phone down between the jar's screws in a loop, the old workbench scar where thousands of cases had kissed the wood. The clocks on my wall were quiet tonight. I let them wind down on purpose. Sometimes silence is the only way to hear what matters. 68 years teaches you a few dirty tricks, and one of them is this: never answer humiliation with noise. Answer it with precision. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Esme wants spectacle. She thinks love is a receipt and family is a guest list. Fine. If she wants a proper gift, I'll bring the only thing that ever held value in this family, time that keeps its word. I pulled the tin from the back of the pantry, the one that used to hold tea bags, and now held the last stubborn soldiers of my savings. Bills flattened under a book, coins wrapped in rubber bands. I counted once, then twice, letting the numbers settle like dust. It was enough if I chose carefully. I shrugged into my best suit, the navy one with the honest shine of too many Sundays, and slid my father's leather strap into my pocket. The strap used to carry a watch we rebuilt together when I was a boy. When it was stolen, the empty strap stayed. What you lose can still hold you to account. The pawn shop bell rasped when I pushed through. The place smelled of dry velvet and old nickel, a choir of objects holding their breath. Behind the glass, I saw it. A small hunter case, silver, hairline and enamel dial like a healed scar. The blued hands were frozen 5 minutes to midnight. I lifted it with 2 fingers, turned it over. Inside the back cover, a faint engraving. For work well done. You a collector? The clerk asked, bored, gum cracking. A repairman, I said, and a grandfather. He quoted a price. I didn't haggle. Pride's expensive, but dignity pays you back with interest. I slid the money over, felt the weight of the case drop into my palm. I put it to my ear out of habit. No heartbeat. Good. Some things are meant to be revived, not replaced. Back on the sidewalk, the city coughed up a light rain. I rested the watch on my wrist to see how it would sit there if I were younger. If life had offered a different hinge to swing from. Well, I would like this one. He has a patient way of listening to machines. Toby has a laugh like a skipping gear, bright, sudden, and liable to jump 2 teeth. I pictured Esme seeing the box and mistaking cost for worth. Let her. I wasn't buying her approval. I was bringing a compass to a woman lost in mirrors. On the way to the event, their grand festival in the old foundry, they turned into a gallery. I took the long route. The foundry's chimneys were black pencils against a leaking sky. I could already smell the oil ghosts that live in brick, even scrubbed clean by money. I rolled the crown between finger and thumb as I waited at a red light, measuring the stubbornness of the spring. A thin metallic resistance pressed against me like someone testing a handshake. The light turned green. I slipped the watch into the glove box and pulled out, only to see hazard lights pulsing up ahead. A dark sedan at an angle on the shoulder. Hood popped like a mouth gasping. A woman stood beside it in a raincoat, hair wet. Phone held up to the sky like it needed better service from clouds. Cars skimmed past, spraying dirty halos. No one slowed. Esme's message flashed on my phone. Gate C. Don't be late. I eased onto the shoulder anyway. A man doesn't measure himself by someone else's clock. I killed the engine, grabbed my toolkit, and stepped into the rain. Evening, I said, voice calm as a second hand. Pop the latch again. I'll get you moving. She turned toward me, relief breaking across her face. And then, over the hiss of the road and the patter on the hood, I heard it, the faintest metallic scream from deep in the engine bay. Something failing that could take the whole car with it if I was wrong by a hair. The rain had a way of magnifying every sound. The hiss of tires on wet asphalt, the dripping rhythm off the hood, the nervous thrum in the woman's breath. I leaned in under the propped hood and traced the source of that metallic scream with my ears, the way a clockmaker listens for the one wheel that stutters. A slip belt. Easy, if you had patience and 2 hands that remembered what to do. Do you know what it is? She asked. Her accent was polished, but there was grit in her voice. Someone used command, but not to helplessness. Belch jumped the track. I said, "You're lucky it didn't shear." She looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. I smiled faintly, fished the right wrench from my kit, and set about coaxing the stubborn piece back in place. My shoulders soaked through, hair dripping into my eyes. None of it mattered. There's a kind of peace in fixing something right there on the edge of failing. Shouldn't take more than 10 minutes, I told her. She offered me a folded bill, a thick one. I shook my head. Keep it. Money doesn't stop rain. Her eyes softened at that. She tucked the bill away, hesitated as if she wanted to say more, but just watched me instead. I finished the job, wiped my hands on a rag, and closed the hood with a solid clunk. Try it now. The engine caught immediately, humming smooth. She let out a short laugh, full of surprise and relief. "You saved me," she said. "Just gave you back your time," I answered and stepped away toward my car. I caught her gaze one last moment, that flicker of curiosity, of gratitude too large for the small favor. Then I was gone, tail lights fading into the drizzle. The factory loomed ahead, its jagged roofline cutting the night like broken teeth. They dressed the place up, string lights hanging from cranes, velvet ropes across rusted doors. But I could still smell the truth of it. Oil, dust, sweat trapped in brick. They wanted glamour, and found only echoes. Inside, champagne flutes clinked, and laughter rose like steam. Sculptures made of twisted scrap glistened under spotlights. Men in tailored jackets gestured with cigarettes. Women balanced on heels sharp enough to pierce the cracked concrete. Esme found me immediately. She swept across the room in silk, her lips red as a warning sign. "You made it." "Barely." Her eyes dipped to the gift box in my hand. "At least you brought something." She didn't ask what it was. She didn't care. "Come," she said, her arm like a blade guiding me. "Sit here." She led me past the gold-lit atrium, past the canvases and installations, into a shadowed corner near the service doors. 2 metal crates stacked against the wall, the faint smell of old grease clinging to them. A flickering bulb buzzed overhead. "Here is fine," she whispered. It wasn't a seat, it was exile. I lowered myself onto the cold chair she dragged there, the watch box balanced in my lap. From across the hall, I saw Lyle tug Toby by the sleeve, pointing toward me. Their small faces lit up, ready to run. "Stay here." Esme snapped at them. "Grandfather is busy." Their shoulders drooped. They retreated into the crowd. A woman in sequins glanced at me, then leaned to her companion. I heard the words like a knife slipped under the ribs. "Why is there an old man by the trash?" Their laughter was soft, but sharp enough to draw blood. I breathed slow, steady. A clock doesn't shout when it's wound too tight. It waits, then strikes. From my corner, I studied the room. The guilt over ruin, the people overplaying their parts, the vanity stretched thin as gold leaf. I thought of the woman on the roadside, the honest gratitude in her voice. A contrast so sharp it made this place seem hollower still. I set the gift box on my knee, fingers brushing the lid, when the double doors at the far end opened. A hush rolled through the hall, like air sucked from a chamber. She walked in, the woman from the rain. Her eyes swept the room, then locked on me. And in that instant, everything tilted. Her entrance cut through the gallery like a blade wrapped in silk. The chatter softened, then died, as if the very walls remembered they had once echoed with hammers and fire. She shed her raincoat into the arms of a waiting attendant, revealing a dress the color of midnight, simple and commanding. Every gaze followed her, though she moved with no effort to claim it. She didn't need to. Authority carries its own gravity. I felt the recognition hit her in the same breath it hit me. Her eyes widened, not with surprise that I was here, but with certainty. She walked straight through the crowd, and the crowd peeled back like gears sliding into place. People whispered her name, Ophelia, a curator, the one whose opinion bent fortunes, whose nod unlocked grants and whose silence buried them. Esme had spoken of her like a distant sun. Now that sun was walking toward the corner where she'd left me in shadow. "Good evening," Ophelia said, stopping before me, Her voice carried, low but deliberate, the kind that made even clinking glasses pause. I know this man. A ripple of curiosity swept the hall. Faces turned, glasses lowered. Esme's smile, frozen halfway, cracked like porcelain. He helped me tonight, Ophelia continued. In the rain. My car dead on the road. He gave his time, his patience, and refused payment. And you seed him here? Her arm gestured to crates. The flickering bulb, the smell of oil. Beside the garbage? The silence thickened. Then a man in a velvet blazer gave a nervous laugh, quickly swallowed when no one joined him. All eyes pivoted to Esme, who tried to speak but found her throat dry. She forced a laugh, brittle. Oh, it was just comfort. He prefers quiet corners. Don't you, Luther? Her words clung to me like a net she prayed I would not tear. I didn't answer. Some moments sharpened themselves by absence. Ophelia tilted her head. Her eyes, calm yet relentless, cut through Esme's performance. Strange, she said, her tone carrying to the back wall, because I've never seen a man more suited for the center of the room. A murmur rose, curious, shifting, like an audience sensing a scene about to change. Esme's hand twitched toward her glass. She gripped it too hard, knuckles whitening. I straightened in my chair, the gift box still on my lap, and felt the weight of the silver watch inside, a steady reminder of what endures. Time does not hurry. Time waits until the exact moment it must strike. Across the hall, Lyle tugged Toby again. The boy's eyes shone, proud and wide, as if they had known all along their grandfather wasn't meant for shadows. Esme leaned close, her breath hot with panic. Say something, she hissed through her teeth. You'll embarrass me. I turned my gaze to her, steady as the pendulum that never lies. Embarrassment, I whispered back, isn't given, it's earned. Her lips parted, but no sound came, and in that split second, Ophelia raised her voice just enough for all to hear. Tell me, why does the matriarch of this family exile its elder? The question slammed into the room like a hammer on steel. Glasses stilled. Conversations froze. A silence deep enough to hear the ticking of my own heart spread through the hall. I lifted the gift box onto the table beside me, folded my hands, and waited, because I knew the real ticking was just beginning. Esme's laugh rang out, brittle and sharp, bouncing off the iron beams above us. Exile? Oh, don't be dramatic. He's just more comfortable here. Aren't you, Luther? She turned to the crowd, her hands spread like she was explaining a quaint family quirk. You know how old men are, set in their ways, preferring quiet corners. The crowd's faces didn't soften. They studied me, then her, suspicion blooming like rust under paint. Ophelia's eyes narrowed, and in them I saw no malice, only judgment honed by years of watching pretenders play their parts. I passed this man on a dark road, she said, her voice steady. Not once did he complain of weather, of delay, or of my ignorance. He fixed what others ignored, and when I offered him money, he refused. Tell me, what kind of family places such a man beside trash cans while they toast their own importance? Whispers flared through the gallery like sparks on dry hay. I saw Esme's poise falter. Her mouth opened, closed, then twisted into a smile too bright to be real. We're grateful for his little skills. A mechanic's touch is charming, but let's not confuse that with legacy. Legacy. She used the word like a blade, turning my life's craft into a parlor trick. My throat tightened, but I held still. Clocks don't shout when struck. They keep ticking until the hour tolls. Behind her, Lyle and Toby peered through a forest of gowns and suits, their eyes finding me again. Lyle lifted his hand, subtle as if to wave, but Esme's sharp glance pinned him. He lowered it, cheeks red, and Toby's laugh, usually quick and bright, died in his throat. Ophelia folded her arms, gaze never leaving Esme. Charming? You think integrity is charming? That patience, craft, and refusal of greed are parlor tricks? Strange, because those are the very qualities our foundation looks for before granting stewardship. I saw the word land like a hammer. Stewardship. That was the grant Esme had paraded before the family, her ticket to prestige, to the circle she worshipped. Without it, Her glittering mask was only powder on cracked stone. The guests shifted. A man in horn-rimmed glasses muttered, "Isn't this the same Esme applying for the restoration fund?" His companion shushed him, but the question lingered, souring the air. Esme's smile wavered. "You misunderstand," she said quickly. "I value family. I brought him here tonight, didn't I?" And set him beside the waist. Ophelia shot back. "If this is how you honor your roots, how do you expect to build a future?" The room hushed again, heavier now. Even the champagne lost its sparkle under the weight of those words. I pressed my palm lightly against the gift box, feeling the shape of the watch beneath. Its silence spoke louder than anything I could have said. Esme's voice rose sharper. "He's old. He doesn't matter like he once did. Surely you all understand. Time moves on." A gasp rippled through the crowd. The cruelty was naked now, not even dressed in silk. I lifted my eyes to hers, steady, unflinching. "Yes, Esme," I said, my voice carrying farther than I intended. "Time does move on, and it shows who we are when it does." Her face drained of color, and in that moment, Ophelia stepped closer to me, hand resting on the back of my chair as if to anchor me in place. She turned to the crowd and declared, her voice cutting clean through the air, "Then let time judge her tonight." The hall seemed to lean forward, waiting for the strike of the next hour. The gallery had become a courtroom. Every eye a jury light. Ophelia's words echoed against the girders overhead. "Then let time judge her tonight." For a moment, even the rain outside seemed to pause, as if the city itself was listening. Esme's lips trembled into a smile too polished to belong to the silence. "Judge, please. This is art, not a trial." She raised her glass and tried to ignite laughter in the room, but the spark wouldn't catch. The crowd's curiosity had shifted into hunger. They wanted to see what came next. I sat with the gift box in my lap, fingers grazing the wood grain, letting the weight of the watch anchor me. I had repaired hundreds of timepieces, but never had I felt a moment so tightly wound, a spring waiting to break free. Ophelia turned her gaze back to Esme. "I've reviewed dozens of applications these past months. Names, proposals, visions of grandeur. But I always look for one thing, how someone treats the roots that grew them. Without that, no building stands." A murmur swept through the guests. They remembered Esme boasting weeks ago about the grant that would place her name in every paper. Now the very arbiter of that dream was dissecting her in public. Esme forced a brittle laugh. "You can't possibly let sentiment decide professional matters." "Sentiment?" Ophelia's brows arched. "You call respect for family sentiment?" Her eyes cut across the hall, pinning everyone in her path. "Then perhaps sentiment is exactly what this place needs." I felt the tide shift. The guests were no longer simply watching. They were siding. Some nodded, some whispered approval. The false shimmer of the gallery dulled, replaced by the raw question, what kind of woman discard her elder for the sake of appearances? Esme's face flushed crimson. She snapped toward me, voice cracking like glass. "Why are you just sitting there? Say something. Defend me." I looked up at her, steady, my voice low but carried by the hush. "You told me to bring a proper gift." "I did, but it wasn't for you." A collective breath drew in, sharp, expectant. Even the boys in the back, Lyle and Toby, leaned forward as if they'd felt the click of gears aligning. Esme's hand shook. She tried to lift her glass again, but it slipped, fell, and shattered across the floor. The splash of champagne spread like a stain of guilt. Ophelia didn't miss a beat. "You see? Even the glass refuses to hold your pretense." Gasps, then a ripple of laughter, first cautious, then rolling, until the whole room trembled with it. Esme stood frozen, humiliated, her power cracking with every note of mirth. I remained seated, silent, the box still unopened. A strategist waits for the right chime. The crowd's laughter wasn't victory. It was only the warning bell, because I knew what still lay inside the watch case. Not just a gift, but a verdict. And when I chose to open it, the hour would strike in full. The laughter rang through the foundry like loose bolts tumbling across steel. It wasn't kind laughter. It was the kind that clings, that rewrites a reputation faster than any headline. Esme's eyes darted from face to face, desperate for rescue, but found only smirks, pity, and thinly veiled delight at her stumble. Public humiliation has a taste, bitter copper on the tongue, and I could see her choking on it. She tried to recover. "Enough!" she snapped, though her voice cracked. "This is ridiculous. We came here to celebrate art, not sentimentality." But the crowd had already shifted. They weren't admiring her jewels or her carefully sculpted persona anymore. They were admiring the spectacle of a woman stripped of control. For all her plotting, she had become the exhibit. I watched from my chair, hands folded over the unopened gift box. A man doesn't need to shout when the room already speaks for him. Silence can be louder than fury. Ophelia raised her chin, addressing everyone. Art is memory. It is blood and iron, hands and stone, time etched into glass. This man, her hand motioned toward me, carries that truth. He is craft, he is endurance. And you? Her eyes cut into Esme. You treat him as excess baggage. If you cannot honor the root, you cannot nourish the branch. It was no longer just about me. Ophelia had reframed the entire evening. This gallery wasn't a triumph. It was a mirror. The rusting beams, the broken machines, the champagne flutes. They were all symbols now of neglect, dress, and finery. Esme took a trembling step forward, her face taut with panic. "This isn't fair. You don't understand the pressure, the expectations. You think family means—" "Family?" I interrupted, my voice calm but cutting across hers like a clean strike of a clock's gong. "Means never leaving a man beside the trash while you chase applause." The room stilled. Even the rain outside seemed to press its palms against the glass to hear better. Lyle's small voice carried from the back, unguarded. "Grandpa doesn't belong in the corner." Every head turned. Toby stood next to him, nodding fiercely, his fists balled in childish defiance. The innocence of it tore through the crowd sharper than any insult. Whispers turned to agreement, then to applause, soft at first, then swelling. Not for Esme, but against her. Esme's composure finally cracked. Her lips twisted into something between a snarl and a plea. They're just children. They don't know what's proper. But the spell was broken. The guests weren't on her side anymore. The boys had drawn a line in the dust, and the room had chosen which side of it they stood on. I placed the gift box gently on the table, my fingers resting on the lid. The weight of the watch pressed through the wood. Waiting, Esme's eyes found mine wide, almost wild. She mouthed the words, "Don't," but time had its own momentum, and I had already heard the gears turning. I knew, when I opened that box, nothing in this family would ever tick the same again. The applause faded into murmurs, but the shift was permanent. Esme was no longer the host of the evening. She was the subject of it. Every flicker of her painted smile looked like a crack in porcelain. She clutched at her necklace as if the pearls could anchor her against the tide pulling her under. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the box beneath my hand like a loaded spring. Not yet. The hour hadn't struck. Strategy demands patience. Let your opponent wear herself thin against her own panic. Ophelia circled slowly, her heels tapping a rhythm on the concrete floor that sounded like judgment itself. "This festival is meant to celebrate endurance," she said to the crowd, "the triumph of form over decay. But what endurance do we honor when we exile the very foundation of our lives?" Heads nodded. A woman in a velvet shawl whispered. She left him with the crates, as though it were already legend. Esme tried to counter. "You don't understand," she said, her voice rising. He's just a watchmaker, a tinkerer. He doesn't belong in these circles." Gasps, murmurs sharp as glass. The insult cut deeper than she knew. To diminish work, to mock hands that built and repaired in a hall of rusted machines turned into art. That was hypocrisy laid bare. I rose slowly, the chair legs scraping against the concrete, a sound that silenced the room like the winding down of a clock. My hand still rested on the box. "I have spent my life with gears and springs," I said, voice steady. "Tiny parts, each one needing respect. You think that makes me small. But without the smallest wheel, the hands never move. Without respect, nothing holds." The hall trembled with its own hush. My words weren't loud, but they carried, filling corners even Esme had tried to bury me in. Ophelia's smile was faint but dangerous. "A man who understands time understands truth," she said. "And truth is exactly what we seek in those we support." Esme flinched. "You can't mean—" "Yes." Ophelia cut in, her verdict delivered like a hammerfall. "Your application is void, effective immediately. We do not grant power to those who despise their roots." The crowd erupted not in cheers, but in the collective intake of breath that follows a collapse. Esme staggered back, her face drained, her fingers trembling around the empty stem of her broken glass. Lyle and Toby broke free from the crowd, then, rushing toward me. They stopped short, uncertain, but their eyes shone with something I hadn't seen in years, pride. I placed the gift box on the table between us, my hand hovering over the lid. Esme lunged forward, desperation raw in her voice. "Don't you dare." The boys looked from her to me. Caught between fear and hope, I let my palm rest on the lid, felt the weight of the silver inside, and whispered, more to myself than anyone, "It's time." And I lifted the lid. The hinges creaked as I lifted the lid, and the faint gleam of silver spilled into the dim corner light. The watch lay nestled on dark velvet, its enamel face lined with that hairline scar, the blued hands frozen at 5 minutes to midnight. Even in silence, it commanded attention, an artifact of patience, a relic of work well done. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The boys leaned closer, eyes wide. To them, it wasn't just an old watch. It was treasure, inheritance, proof that the man in the shadows had carried something greater than shame all along. Esme staggered forward, panic sharpening her whisper into a hiss. "Put away. Now." I didn't move. I lifted the watch carefully, the chain glinting in the gallery lights. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is not for display. It is not for fashion or for grants. This is time itself, time that outlives applause." Ophelia's eyes caught mine, approving, urging me on without a word. She understood. The watch wasn't just an object. It was a sentence, a verdict, a mirror. Esme tried to laugh, high and brittle. "A trinket? You call this a gift? How quaint." But her voice shook, and the crowd heard it. The laughter that followed wasn't with her this time. It was at her. I turned, slowly, until the hall hushed again. "I bought this with my last savings. Not for status. Not to impress. I bought it to remind my family of what endures when all else fails." The silence tightened. Every word dropped like a weight. I reached for Lyle's wrist, his small hand trembling but eager. The chain clicked softly as I looped it around, the watch resting against the skin. His eyes lit up, wonder and pride mingling, as though he suddenly understood every tick of every clock I'd ever shown him. Esme lunged, voice breaking. "Stop. That's mine to give, not yours." The crowd recoiled at her outburst, the third humiliation of the night. Her mask ripped off completely. People whispered, "Selfish, cruel, shameless." I looked at her, the faintest smile tugging at my mouth. "No, Esme, time doesn't belong to you. It belongs to those who respect it." Lyle clutched the watch, his chin lifting. Toby pressed closer, nodding fiercely. For the first time, the boys weren't afraid of her. They were proud of me. Ophelia stepped forward then, her voice carrying the final stroke of the hour. "And so it is settled. The man you cast aside is the only one who gave this evening meaning." The applause that broke out wasn't just polite. It was sharp, decisive, a verdict in sound. Guests turned away from Esme, leaving her stranded in the glow of her own collapse. I closed the empty box and set it down. My hands were free now, my place reclaimed. Esme's eyes burned into me, wild, desperate, as though she just realized this was never about a grant or a gallery, or even a family gathering. It was about judgment. And judgment had arrived right on time. The applause rolled through the foundry like thunder trapped in iron beams. For the first time that evening, I stood tall, not in defiance, but in simple presence. My chair scraped back, the sound crisp, final. The weight of humiliation no longer pressed on me. It sat squarely on Esme's shoulders. She tried to rally. Her hands fluttered, desperate birds seeking escape. "Enough of the spectacle. You're all mistaken. He's nothing more than a sentimental relic. Look at him, an old man playing with broken toys." The words cracked against the walls and fell flat. Even the guests who had once fawned over her now shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to be dragged down with her. I glanced toward the boys. Lyle cradled the watch, its chain glinting under the gallery lights. Toby's hand rested protectively on his brother's arm, as though guarding something sacred. Their faces shone with pride, unburdened by the shame Esme had tried to plant in them. I turned back to the room. "Broken toys?" I said, my voice low but steady. "This watch survived longer than your laughter. It carries scars, but it runs true. Can you say the same?" Gasps flickered across the crowd. A man near the back muttered, "Well said," and others nodded. The tide had fully turned. Ophelia's heels clicked against the concrete as she stepped forward. "Do you understand now, Esme?" she asked, calm as a verdict already written. "This man is legacy. You are noise. One endures. The other fades." Esme shook her head violently, as though trying to shatter the truth by sheer denial. "No, you can't take this from me. You don't know what I've sacrificed." Her voice broke on the word sacrificed, and with it, her last shield crumbled. The crowd leaned back, no longer enthralled, but repulsed. They saw not a matriarch, but a desperate woman clawing at crumbling walls. The irony was rich. In this gallery of rust and ruin, she had become the most fragile exhibit of all. I stepped closer, my shadow falling across her. "Sacrifice," I said. "Real sacrifice is pouring your life into others and asking for nothing in return. I gave decades to this family, to your children, to the roof over your head, and still you call me nothing." Her eyes widened, lips trembling. She reached for words, but none came. The silence pressed heavy, broken only by the faint ticking of the newly wound watch on Lyle's wrist. That small sound filled the hall, louder than applause, louder than her gasps. And in that silence, I felt the moment shift again, not just judgment, but something deeper. The crowd wasn't merely condemning her. They were remembering themselves, parents, children, the weight of blood and memory. Esme staggered back, cornered not by me, but by the truth reflected in every watching eye. And I knew the final collapse had only just begun. Esme backed against the cold brick wall, her shadow twitching in the strobe with a flickering bulb. The pearls at her neck rattled as her breath came quick, shallow, almost frantic. The guests parted away from her as if shame were contagious, leaving a gulf of space where once she had commanded attention. Her voice cracked the silence. "You think this changes anything? You think one trinket, one watch can undo me? I built everything we have." The words rang hollow. The guests exchanged glances, skeptical, some openly shaking their heads. The gallery's hum of voices was no longer her ally. It was the restless stir of people eager to witness the fall. I stepped forward slowly, every motion deliberate, as if each step was a hand winding the gears tighter. "Built? You didn't build, Esme. You decorated. You took ruins and called them gold. But the foundation, that was sweat and work and time. And you spat on it." Her lips curled. "You dare lecture me? You, a man who smells of oil and dust." I smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. "Yes, because oil and dust are honest. They don't pretend to be silk when they're rot." The crowd stirred, a low ripple of approval. Ophelia's eyes glittered like a judge satisfied by the cross-examination. Esme clutched at the air, desperate. She pointed to Lyle, the watch shining faintly on his wrist. "That doesn't belong to you, boy. Give it back." Gasps. Toby stepped in front of his brother, fists tight, voice small but fierce. "No, it's his now. Grandpa gave it." The simplicity of the words cut sharper than any speech. The audience leaned in, captivated by the courage of a child against a tyrant. Esme's face twisted, part fury, part disbelief. "You'll regret this," she hissed at me. "I'll make sure of it." I held her gaze, steady. "Regret is already yours, Esme. It started the moment you put me in that corner." Ophelia's voice carried then, cold and final. "The board will hear of this. Your grant is rescinded, effective tonight. The declaration hit harder than any blow. Esme's knees buckled. She gripped the wall to stay upright. A murmur of finality spread through the hall. Contract severed, reputation in tatters. Still, she tried to salvage dignity. Straightening her spine, she spat. None of you would even be here without me. You'll all come crawling back. But the crowd answered her with silence. The cruelest judgment of all. They had already turned away. I bent slightly, addressing her alone, though the hall carried my words. Time doesn't crawl back, Esme. It only moves forward. Her eyes widened, wet, furious, as if she finally understood that no mask, no plea, could rewind what had just struck. And as I stepped back into the circle of light with the boys at my side, the sound of that little watch ticked steady, merciless. It was the sound of her empire collapsing. Second by second, the gallery air had changed, thicker now, as if every breath carried the weight of finality. The guests drifted toward me and the boys, forming a circle that excluded Esme entirely. For years, she had been the sun. We were forced to orbit. Tonight, she was a dying star, shrinking into her own collapse. Lyle held the watch up, chain glinting against his wrist. It's ticking now, Grandpa, he whispered, awe in his voice. And it was the delicate beat of a heart reborn, steady and alive. The sound filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in decades. Esme lurched forward, her voice a jagged edge. Stop the charade. That boy doesn't know what he's holding. He'll break it, Her words drowned beneath Ophelia's cool reply, better broken in honest hands and caged in greedy ones. The room responded with a ripple of laughter, soft, cutting. Esme's face twisted, another mask shattered. Her third humiliation was complete. First the laughter at her broken glass, then the rescinded grant, and now this, the open mockery of her authority. I turned to the boys. You hear that tick? That's not just a sound. That's every second earned by sweat, every breath that carried us here. Guard it well, because time never gives back what you waste. Lyle nodded solemnly. Toby leaned closer, whispering, We'll keep it safe. The crowd seemed moved, their expressions shifting from curiosity to reverence. Strangers who had mocked me hours ago now looked at me as if I were the only solid pillar in the hall. Esme saw it too. Her eyes darted, searching for an ally, but found none. Even those who once fed on her charm had turned their shoulders. She raised her chin, her voice trembling with rage and desperation. You're all fools. You'll see I'll rebuild. I always rebuild. I faced her squarely. Rebuilding requires a foundation. Esme, and you just burned yours down. Her lips pressed tight, trembling. For the first time, she had no reply. Ophelia approached me, her voice softer now, private yet audible enough for the hall to hear. You gave me no name, no title when you helped me tonight. Only honesty. That is why you matter. That is why you endure. The words landed like a benediction. My chest tightened, not with pride, but with release. After years of being dismissed, my craft, my patience, my very existence had been named for what it was worthy. The boys slipped their hands into mine, their small fingers warm against my calloused palm. Together, we stood in the center of the hall, where once I'd been banished to the dark corner. Esme's voice, faint now, tried one last time. This isn't over. I looked at her, calm, the watch ticking between us. Yes, it is. You just don't hear the final stroke yet. The silence that followed was absolute. Every guest, every shadow, seemed to hold its breath, because they knew, as I knew, the hour hand was still climbing. And when it struck, the echo would be devastating. The silence hung, taut as a mainspring wound to breaking. Every guest sensed it, that fragile moment before the hammer falls, before the chime resounds. Esme stood at the edge of the circle, her silk gown trembling with every uneven breath. She looked less like a hostess now and more like a cornered animal pacing against invisible bars. She broke first. You think this spectacle makes you noble? Her words scraped raw, a shriek against quiet dignity of the hall. He's nothing, just an old man clinging to scraps of metal. You're all blind. The crowd recoiled. Even the chandeliers above seemed to sway in judgment, light trembling across the rusted beams. Her voice echoed off the walls that once housed fire and smoke, turning the gallery into a cavern of disgrace. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is sharper than any retort. Instead, I bent slightly, adjusting the chain on Lyle's wrist, careful, precise, the way a surgeon sets bone. The watch ticked steady, patient, as though mocking Esme's frenzy. Ophelia moved then, her heels striking deliberate notes across the concrete. She faced Esme, calm as a verdict already carved. "What you call scraps," she said, "others call memory. What you dismiss as metal, others recognize as legacy. And legacy outlasts noise." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the guests. A woman near the front whispered, "She's right." A man nodded gravely, eyes fixed on the watch. Esme's cheeks flushed, her mask shattering piece by piece. She spun on the audience, desperate. "You can't all turn on me. You came here for me, for MY Festival." But no one moved toward her. The circle remained unbroken, its center now firmly in my hands, in the small wrists of my grandsons. I straightened, meeting her eyes. "No, Esme. They came for art. And tonight, art revealed truth. That truth was never yours to own." Her chest heaved, fury mixing with something more dangerous, fear. She realized she was alone, stripped not just of grants and admiration, but the illusion of control. The boys squeezed my hands tighter. Toby whispered, almost gleeful, "She's scared." I gave a small nod. She should be, because time is honest. Ophelia lifted her glass, her tone final. "This night will be remembered, not for what you tried to build, Esme, but for what was revealed when the mask fell." Glasses clinked around the hall, not in toast to Esme, but to her undoing. The sound was sharp, decisive, the kind of echo that would follow her long after the lights dimmed. Esme stumbled back, as though the applause itself had struck her. She clutched the wall, eyes wild, searching for escape, but every doorway looked like a judgment she could not outrun. And then, as if on cue, the foundry's old clock, long dormant, let out a groan. Its gears ground, its bell tolled once, heavy and deep. The hour had struck, and with it, the last of Esme's composure crumbled. The bell's echo rolled through the hall, low and ancient, shaking dust from the rafters. It wasn't part of the exhibition. Everyone knew the foundry's old clock had been silent for decades. Yet here it was, groaning alive, as if the building itself wanted to bear witness. The guests turned their heads upward, startled, then back to Esme. She stood frozen in the circle of light, pearls trembling at her throat, eyes wide as if the toll had summoned a ghost only she could see. For the first time in years, I saw fear peel away her practiced smile until nothing was left but the raw face beneath. Ophelia didn't flinch. She raised her glass calmly and said, "There, even the walls remember who labored here. They will not remain silent for pretense." Murmurs surged through the crowd. They weren't looking at the art anymore. They were watching the theater of downfall, transfixed. Esme's voice cracked. "It's a trick, some stage performance." She gestured wildly toward the clock overhead. You all think this is meaningful? It's just gears and rust." Her denial only fed the spectacle. I stepped forward, each stride measured. My voice cut through the murmurs. "Even rust tells a story, Esme, and tonight it chose to speak louder than you." The crowd broke into applause again, not raucous, but steady, deliberate, like the ticking of 100 unseen watches. Each clapped another nail in her coffin. Lyle lifted the silver watch on his wrist, holding it up so its glint caught the lights. "Grandpa's watch is ticking, too," he said proudly. Toby grinned, nodding. Their innocence amplified the moment. The contrast between them and Esme's unraveling was too stark to ignore. I crouched. I leveled with the boys. "Do you hear it? The old clock above, the new one here? They're striking together now. That's what truth sound like." Esme let out a strangled laugh, brittle as broken glass. "Truth? You call this truth? You've poisoned them, turned them against me." Ophelia's tone sharpened, final. "No, you did that yourself. We only watched it unfold. The gallery, once her stage, had become her gallows. Every step she took seemed heavier, every breath louder, as though even her body betrayed her. I rose again, facing her square. Time doesn't conspire, Esme. It reveals. And tonight it revealed you. The bell tolled once more, deeper, echoing in the hollow bones of the factory. People shivered, some even crossing themselves. Esme clasped her hands over her ears as if she could silence it, but the sound lived inside the walls, inside the silence between claps, inside the watch ticking steadily on my grandson's wrist. And when she lowered her hands, pale and trembling, she looked at me with hatred so sharp it was almost a plea. "I won't let you win," she whispered. But the room had already judged otherwise. And I knew. The final strike was coming soon, and it would not be mine alone to deliver. Esme's whisper lingered in the air, a blade dulled by desperation. The crowd no longer gasped at her defiance. They pitted it. Nothing corrodes faster than power once it slips, and hers was flaking off her like rust under rain. I stood still, hands resting lightly on the boy's shoulders. "You think this is about winning?" I asked, my voice level, steady as a pendulum swing. "This isn't a game, Esme. It's a reckoning." She recoiled as though the word itself had struck her. Reckoning. The gallery seemed to echo it back in a hush, as if the walls knew the taste of judgment. Someone in the audience laughed, quick and sharp. Others joined, their amusement slicing through the silence. Not at me, at her. Esme turned red, her lips tightening, her fists clenched at her sides. It was the laughter that killed her most. It had been her favorite weapon, now turned against her. "Stop it," she shrieked. "Stop laughing." But the chuckles only deepened. To be mocked in her temple of vanity. This was a third and deepest cut. No grant, no jewel, no photograph in society pages could plaster over it now. Ophelia raised a hand, and the sound ebbed into stillness. Her voice carried clear, sharp. "Enough. Tonight was meant to honor endurance. And it has. But not yours, Esme. You mistook endurance for control. Control rots. Endurance lives." The words hung heavy. The guests nodded, some even applauding softly. They weren't celebrating me. Not yet. They were celebrating the truth finally spoken aloud. Esme's chest heaved. Her eyes darted toward the doors, as if escape could undo the judgment. But there was no exit from the truth. Not here. Not tonight. I glanced down at Lyle and Toby. Their faces were solemn now, as if they understood the gravity of what was unfolding. Lyle clutched the watch tighter, as though guarding the heartbeat of the night itself. I turned back to Esme. "You had the chance to lead with honor, to let these boys see dignity in you. Instead, you taught them vanity, cruelty, and fear. That lesson ends here." Her voice broke into a ragged whisper. "They're mine." I shook my head slowly. "No, they belong to the future. And the future is something you can't own." The audience erupted again, not in laughter this time, but in applause, firm, resounding, final. The noise filled every corner of the hall, rattling the steel beams, shaking loose whatever illusion still clung to Esme's frame. She raised her hands as if to shield herself from the sound, pearls snapping loose, scattering across the concrete like broken promises. Guests stepped aside, watching the beads roll into the shadows. Her crown had fallen, invisible yet absolute, and as the clapping thundered around us, I felt it, like the winding of a spring brought to its limit. The next strike would be the last, and when it came, it would leave no doubt who had truly endured. The pearls kept rolling across the concrete, clicking into the shadows like seconds falling off a clock, each one a fragment of her crumbling mask. Esme bent as if to gather them, but her trembling hands froze halfway. She realized what the crowd saw. Not a hostess, not a matriarch, but a scavenger clawing for scraps. She straightened quickly, her face flushed, but the damage was done. I stepped forward, my shoes echoing against the floor. The boys stood behind me, watch ticking steady on Lyle's wrist. The sound was soft, but in that silence it might as well have been a hammer, counting down the last moments of her dominion. "Esme," I said, my voice low, deliberate, "time has never been yours to command. You mistook control for respect. You mistook fear for love. Tonight you face the truth. Neither bends to you. Her eyes shone wet, fury and panic in equal measure. I gave you everything. Without me, you'd still be tinkering in your workshop, forgotten, a nobody. The guests hissed, the words stinging them as much as me. Ophelia's lips tightened, but she let me answer. I took a breath, letting silence sharpen my reply. Forgotten? A man who builds, who repairs, who gives freely. He is never forgotten. It's the one who takes, who diminishes, who devours. She is the one history erases. The applause that followed was no longer polite. It was thunderous, defiant. Strangers clapped not just for me but against her, their palms a verdict louder than any gavel. Esme swayed, caught in the gale of sound. She turned toward the guests, pleading, "You don't understand. She's poisoning you, turning you all against me." Her finger stabbed toward Ophelia, then toward me. "This is a conspiracy." Ophelia stepped forward, calm as iron. "No, Esme. This is consequence. You authored it yourself." The hall roared again, murmurs, applause, even laughter, waves crashing against the last stones of her fortress. I looked at Lyle, at Toby, and saw their faces alight with something new, certainty. They had seen cruelty collapse, dignity endure. That was the inheritance I wanted for them, more than any watch. I raised my hand gently, and the applause ebbed into silence. Esme stared at me, wild-eyed, as if expecting another blow. But I only spoke the words she had tried to bury. "Time shows who you are." Her knees buckled. She caught herself on the edge of a table, gasping. The crowd leaned in, spellbound, knowing the final chime was near. And in that suspended moment, watch ticking, pearls scattered, silence heavy as a tolling bell, I knew the reckoning had one last stroke left to strike. The hall waited, every breath tethered to the ticking of the silver watch on Lyle's wrist. Esme clung to the table, her knuckles white, pearls scattered at her feet like the remnants of a kingdom stripped bare. She looked at me, eyes wild, voice breaking into a ragged plea. "You think this makes you victorious? That they'll love you now?" Her words faltered, thin as cracked glass. "They'll forget you tomorrow. But me, I'll rise again." I stepped closer, each footfall steady, like the measured swing of a pendulum. The circle of guests parted to let me through. Ophelia's gaze followed, firm, expectant. She knew what was coming, as did everyone, the final stroke of the hour. I stopped before Esme, close enough to see the ruin in her face. "No, Esme," I said quietly, but my words carried across the iron rafters. "They won't forget, because time never forgets. It marks every cruelty, every vanity, every betrayal. And when the hour strikes, it shows the truth." Lyle lifted his wrist. The watch gleamed, alive now, its beat audible even in the silence. Tick, 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 each sound a verdict. Toby slipped his hand into mine, his small grip, steadying me more than he knew. Esme shook her head, trembling. "That watch means nothing." I looked at the boys, then back at her. "It means everything, because it proves what endures. Not wealth, not grants, not masks, only dignity, only time." I reached down, guided Lyle's hand, and let the watch rest flat against the table where the guests could see. Its face caught the light, the hands aligned at last. I tapped the glass once with my finger, firm. The foundry's old bell groaned and tolled. A single, perfect strike. The crowd erupted, applause, cheers, even shouts. But I heard only the sound of the bell, the echo folding into the steady heartbeat of the watch. Together they rang like judgment and absolution bound in one. Esme staggered, her breath hitching. The laughter, the applause, the bell, they all crushed against her until she could no longer hold her mask. She sank to her knees, head bowed, pearls rolling from her lap like tears she could not shed. Ophelia lifted her glass high. "To endurance," she declared. The guests echoed, voices thunderous, glasses raised. I took the watch back into my palm, then bent to Lyle. With care, I slid it onto his wrist again and fastened the chain. He looked at me, eyes bright, and I whispered so all could hear, "Time shows who you are." The words rang final, more binding than any sentence. The applause swelled again, filling the foundry, rattling its bones. I stood tall, my grandsons at my side, the symbol of our legacy ticking steady against young skin. Esme remained on the floor, undone by the very stage she had built. No words left, no mask to wear, only silence, heavy and unrelenting. And as the last chime faded, I knew justice had come, not in fury, but in rhythm, not in vengeance, but in revelation. The foundry's walls breathed again. The guests rejoiced, and I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. It was over, the reckoning complete. And for the first time in decades, I could hear the sound of time without sorrow. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.